All right, so sometimes in life we have to learn how to solve for a specific variable. Okay, so we're actually in this particular lesson, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of do number 1 real quick, but the main lesson is going to be over problems like number 2, where we're solving for a specific variable. So we're going to go ahead and start with number 1 just so it doesn't feel like left out. So we have a rectangle. Now it says the perimeter of the rectangle is 42 centimeters. Just remember, perimeter means the distance all the way around. Okay. Now perimeter, there is a formula. The perimeter is 2 times the length plus 2 times the width. These little L's are the length. Okay. It says the length of the rectangle can be represented by x plus 4. So I got x plus 4. I got x plus 4. And its width can be expressed by 2x minus 7. 2x minus 7. And so I could actually plug in some numbers here. 42 equals 2 times the length, which is x plus 4, and 2 times the width, which is 2x minus 7. And then we're going to go ahead and solve it. All right, so let's go ahead and distribute. 2 times x is 2x. 2 times 4 is 8. 2 times 2 is 4x. 2 times negative 7 is negative 14. Let's add everything together. So let's go ahead and combine some like terms. We'll put it right over here. What's 2x and 4x added together? We get a total of 6x. 8 minus 14 is negative 6. And when we're solving for x, we've got to isolate the variable, so you add 6 to both sides. Okay, go to 48. And of course, the last step, you just divide by the number that's in front of the letter, so you divide both sides by 6. And what does x equal? X equals 8. So what I'd have to do here is I'd have to plug in the number 8 right there, and I'd have to plug in the number 8 right there, and I'd have to plug in the number 8 right there and right there. All right, so 8 plus 4 is 12. All right, and then we have 16 minus 7 is 9. So it looks like the length is 12 and the width is 9. And so my answer would be D in this particular circumstance. So we basically solve for x and you plug it back in. So that's number 1. Now number 2, what we're going to do is I'm going to give us a little more space here. Let's take a look at number 2. This one's a little more complicated. All right, it says in order to determine the slant height of several pyramids, Marjorie uses the surface areas formula. Surface area equals 1/2 perimeter of the base times the slant height plus the area of the base. For the slant height, which is L, all right, which equation in terms of L represents the correct transformation of the surface area formula. So basically we're going to manipulate this formula. Now for me it always was helpful that somebody kind of drew a picture to go with it. So I'm going to draw a pyramid as best I can for you. Draw a pyramid. Now a pyramid is always named by the base. All right, so let's just pretend this is a rectangular based pyramid. Let me make that a little bit better. Oh, that's horrible. Come on, you can do this, man. All right, there we go. That's not bad. Oh, one more. That's not bad right there. Okay, so we have a pyramid. Now, I'm going to label some things. So this part right here, this is called the area of the base, because that base is, we call that, that's a rectangle. I know it looks like a parallelogram, but it's a rectangle. Now there's this thing called the slanted height that you need in order to find what's called the surface area. Just remember, the surface area is the area that's like on the surface. So to find the surface area, you would need to know what this slanted height is. All right. Now the perimeter of the base is like all these sides of the base added together. So to find the total surface area, you would have to do 1/2 the perimeter of the base times the slant height plus the area of the base. So S represents surface area, P represents perimeter of the base. This little funny L, that's the slant height. So this little L here, I'm going to put slant, that's the slant height. And then capital B is the area of the base. So this is really not a really great question, but you know, it's DMAC, so they ask questions that don't really give you a whole lot of depth. It's an Algebra 1 question, but they're expecting no geometry. But basically, all we're going to be doing is solving for L. All right? There we go. So we're going to solve for L. So what do we do when we solve for an equation? We got to isolate everything except for this L. So you guys see this positive B? So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to basically take away a b from both sides. All right? So now look what I have left. This is s minus b. So I'm going to put s minus b equals 1/2 p times the slant height. All right? Now, sometimes some of you might be tempted to divide both sides by 1/2, but what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to multiply this side and this whole side by the reciprocal of 1/2. And the reciprocal is 2/1. Now 2/1 is technically just 2, so I'm just going to leave it as a 2. Okay. Now what happens? What is 1/2 times a 2/1? Well, that becomes 2/2, which is just a 1. So what happens here? These literally just go, they cancel each other out to a 1. Awesome. So what do I have left? I have 2 times s, 2 times negative b. That's supposed to be an s, just so you guys know it's an s, not a 5. That's an s minus 2b, because I distributed. 2 times s is 2s, 2 times negative b is negative 2b. And that leaves me with a p times this funny looking L, which is the slant height. Now the last thing, all you got to do is just to divide both sides by p. And you're done. What is your slant height always? I'm trying to make a better slant height. Your slant height is always going to be equal twice the surface area. Remember, that's an S. Twice the surface area minus 2 times the area of the base all over the perimeter of the base, and that would be the formula. Now sometimes they might leave it as this. They might leave it as 2 parentheses s minus b without distributing it, put it all over p. So either way, it's the same. It's the same. Okay. All right. All right. Let's do another problem. All right. Let's do number 4. Okay, let's take a look at number 4. So number 4, we have what's called a volume of a cylinder. So let me make sure I'll draw out a cylinder for you. So here we go. We've got a cylinder. So these are what all right cylinders look like. Well, they don't. I mean, they look similar. There we go. And I'll just kind of draw that down a little bit more. Okay, so in a cylinder, we have this distance from the center of the circular base to the outermost point, and that part is called the radius. All right, that's called the radius. And then we have this length from here to here, we call that the height. And volume of this cylinder, like if you were to fill it like with water or whatever you're filling it with, okay? Volume is equal to pi times the radius squared times the height. Volume equals pi r squared h. Now it says, which equation can be represented when we had to solve for h? So this is going to be really easy because all I'm doing is solving for h. Okay? I'll go ahead and do another, I'll kind of do another problem with this where it's a little bit more difficult where we solve for r. We're going to solve for h. So if we're solving for h, all we got to do is just divide both sides by pi r squared and we're done. So all of these cancel out all of these. So our height of our cylinder will always equal the volume divided by the product of pi and the radius squared. That would be the formula for your height. Just remember, what are we doing in this particular lesson? We are learning how to solve for a what? Specific variable. For the first one, we solved for L. The second one, we solved for H. Okay? All right, so what I'm going to be working on now is we already saw the picture of the cylinder where we solved for the height. Now what we're going to do is we're going to actually solve for r. So what if I took this formula right here? And we already know what h is, but what if I decided I wanted to solve for r? How would I go about doing it? It's not that hard. Divide both sides by pi and h, because those will both cancel to 1. Pi divided by pi is 1. H divided by h is 1. Just remember, whatever you do to one side, you must do to the other side. So here's what I have left. I have r squared equals the volume of the cylinder divided by the product of pi times the height. Now, if you look at the graphing calculator, I don't know if you guys can see this. See that x squared and that square root? Alright, so basically that's how you unsquare something that's being squared, is you take the square root. Just like, what's the reverse operation of multiplication, division? What's the reverse operation of adding, subtracting? The reverse operation of squaring something is taking the square root. So what I'm going to do right here, check this out. I'll take the square root of both sides. Now the square root of r squared just leaves you with r. And you're done. Okay. And that's going to be your final answer. So, what we're going to do is, right, we're going to go over, we're going to show you guys kind of what a quiz looks like, all right, that you might have to do, all right. So there's 20 questions. I'm not going to do all of them, all right, but I'm going to do some of them right here, so you can kind of see what it's like. It says we have a simple interest is equal to the principal times the rate times the time. So interest is equal to principal times rate times time. Now it says we want to solve for what letter? Solve for R. So we'll be solving for the letter R. All right, see if we can do that. If I'm solving for R, that means I'm going to have to divide both sides by P and by T. Alright, so what happens? These cancel out, and your rate is equal to the interest divided by the principal divided by time. And that would be your answer. I over P T. I'm not going to tell you the answer, but you can clearly see it. Let's do another one. Let's do a more complicated one. Ooh, I like it. Let's do Celsius equals, right? Let's go ahead and move down just a little bit. We have Celsius is equal to 5/9 of Fahrenheit minus 32. This is a real world formula. All right. Now, this one says solve for F. So how would we solve for F? Now, the first thing you're going to do, this pesky little 5/9, I'm going to multiply both sides by 9/5. And so what happens? 5/9 times 9/5, that equals a 1, because 45 divided by 45 is 1. These cancel out, and these cancel out. Alright, so that's 5 multiplied by the reciprocals. Let's see what we have left. We have 9/5 times C equals. Now, this 5 cancels out this 5, and this 9 cancels out this 9. So look what we have left. We have F minus 32. Alright, we're almost done. Because basically we got F by itself, almost. We just have one step. Just got to add a 32 to this side. We got to add a 32 to this side. Alright, so here's your final answer. The Fahrenheit will always equal 9/5 times the Celsius plus 32, and that's what F would equal. Alright, let's go to another one. Ooh, let's take a look at this one real quick. Alright, it says AX minus B equals 5. Solve for A. So we have A times X minus 5 equals B. And we have to solve for A, so we've got to get A by itself. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add 5 to this side. I'm going to add a 5. Apparently my phone is ringing. It must be an animal interest. So I had to pause the video right there. I got a phone call. Alright, so right now we have, that zeroes out. We have A times X equals B plus 5. Alright, and then if we're solving for A, if it says, hey, you need to solve for A, that means I have to divide both sides by X. Because why are you dividing it by X? Because it's solved for A, so I got to divide both sides by X. And so these cancel each other out, and that's what I'm left with. B plus 5 all over X, and that's your final answer. Okay. Let's go down to another one. Let's do a little more difficult one. Ooh, let's let's do the area of a circle when it says solve for r. That's a good one, huh? All right, here we go. So if I have the area of a circle, which is pi times the radius squared, it says solve for r, what am I going to have to do? Well, first thing I got to do is I got to get r squared by itself, so I'm going to divide both sides by pi. So what happens when you divide both sides by pi? Well, pi divided by pi is 1, and we're left with r squared equals a over pi. Now if we go back to our original problem right here, you'll notice, hey, what was our final step when we were solving for the radius for a cylinder? We took the what? Took the square root. Well, we're going to do the same thing here. Same thing. Okay? So what does that mean? That means I got to take the square root of this side, I got to take the square root of this side. So the square root of r squared is just r. And I'm left with the square root of a over pi. And that's your answer. You're done. Alright, let's do one more. Ooh, that's a good one. I would do that one, but that requires you to do the same thing we did for, let's see here. How about, okay, let's do an inequality. We'll finish up with an inequality, because inequalities sometimes are confusing to students. This one says solve for y. So what do we got here? We got 2x minus 5y is greater than or equal to 15. We got to solve for y. So I'm going to highlight it right there. We got to solve for y. So you got to treat this inequality sign like an equal sign. So we got to take away 2x. Okay, we got to take away 2x from both sides. So what I got left? That zeroes out. I'm left with negative 5y is greater than or equal to, and watch what I do. I'm going to move the negative 2x up front. I'll put the 15 right there in the back. Okay, so I'll put the 15 right here in the back. Now, we still have the inequality sign we got to pay attention to, because now we have to divide every single number by this negative 5. Now, I don't know if you guys remember what happens when you multiply or divide an inequality by a negative, but the sign flips. So a greater than or equal to sign becomes a less than or equal to sign. Now, a negative divided by a negative is a positive, and 15 divided by a negative 5 is a minus 3, and that's going to be my final answer right there. Okay. And you're done. So remember, what are we doing? We are solving for a specific variable, which basically means you need to isolate the variable on one side, alright, and then eventually you're going to have to divide by the number that's in front of the letter. Okay? Or you could call it multiply both sides by the reciprocal. Alright, so hopefully these will be enough examples for you guys to do well on your next quiz. Have a good day.